Hi everybody, Bart Terrio, Montessori Academy, Belmont Green. This is going to be part 2 of our series on homeschooling, learning Montessori from home. And I'm going to kind of try to pick up where we left off from part 1, which was building the partnership. It's Saturday morning. We are just about to start on week 3 of this new situation, this new paradigm that we're in. My kids are watching cartoons because that's what you do on Saturday morning. So I just kind of wanted to maybe do a little temperature check. In part 1 we talked about setting up structure. The first week of this situation probably felt to you and your children kind of like an extended snow vacation. Week 2, I think everybody started to look at this more as a reality, and that was probably the week where you might have started creating more of a structured schedule. If you don't have a whole week planned out schedule, totally fine, and in fact really you shouldn't. What you want to try to have achieved maybe at this point is to have a couple of things that the children can sort of expect that are going to happen at a regular time. Whatever those things are for you is just fine. It could be we go to the playground every day at this time. In addition to the waking up and the breakfast, I have a little video on the YouTube channel, which is just a backyard observation. And I set that up, maybe not necessarily because it's the most wonderful possible activity, but it's something that we can check every day at the same time. And even if we don't find anything in it, it still offers some structure and consistency for the children. And that's going to pay off the longer this goes on. So the beginning of week 3 also for teachers, we understand that this is usually kind of the beginning of the end of the honeymoon period. And that's where both you and your child are going to start to get into a rhythm or out of a rhythm, as the case may be. And sometimes that new level of comfort that your child has creates its own problems. But we should also talk about what to choose in terms of work. And in order to do that, rather than right now focusing on actual activities, because I'm sure you've probably seen the avalanche of online content that's just sort of cascading across your screens all day. And so it's hard to choose from those things, but at least the good news is that, we're never going to run out of things for your child to see and do online. But there is a concept that I think is really, really valuable for every educator, every homeschooling adult, that's going to help you maybe look at work a little bit more differently and enable you to choose work that fits with your child and you and the partnership that you're building more specifically. And it's called Indirect Learning. Dr. Montessori was an absolute genius, and so she embedded this concept into every single lesson that you'll find in the classroom. And so I was going to try to explain that here, and I'm going to rely on a fantastic movie called The Karate Kid. If you haven't seen this movie, I'm sorry, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but also if you haven't seen this movie, shame on you. You need to, after this video, go and watch it. Anyways, stars Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita. There's Jill. I'm just doing a follow-up to part 1. Talking about indirect learning, and of course you have to talk about Mr. Miyagi. So there's a part in the movie where for about a week, Mr. Miyagi has Daniel doing works like sanding the wood deck that he has, painting the fence, painting the house, waxing the cars. And each time he has him do a new task, he does something very important, which is just like the Montessori teacher. He gives him a lesson. So he sits down and Daniel kind of starts sanding the floor in a weird, haphazard way. Mr. Miyagi says, no, this is how you do it. And he gives him a very specific circular motion like this, okay? He does that for all these different things. Anyways, a week into all this work, Daniel thinks he's going to be training to be a karate master, and so he kind of gets fed up with Miyagi, and he's like, you just have me do all this work for nothing? He starts complaining to Miyagi. Well, Miyagi says, all right, let me show you. He goes, show me stand on the floor. And Ralph Macchio, Daniel, goes like this, okay? And Miyagi starts doing karate things at him. Anyways, lo and behold, Daniel-san has indirectly, without knowing it, learned all the skills he needs to be a karate master. And that's indirect learning. And you can be Mr. Miyagi. And so I think that's just, I'm sorry, it's making light of the situation, but that's what we do here. And so let's talk about some work and how the indirect lessons factor in. And practical life work in the Montessori classroom is a great way to look at this, because the indirect learning jumps out at you. One of those practical life lessons is pouring, and it's a little tray and it's 2 little pitchers, and the teacher does that same Miyagi style lesson where we show the child specifically with the pincer grip, we hold the pitcher, we pour it just a little bit into the next pitcher, and it's on a tray. Everything's kind of set up, and then we back away and we let the child do it. Now, yes, to the child, I'm learning to pour. But we know that there's all these other indirect skills going on. And some of them are problem solving. Because when the child spills on the ground, that's a problem. But we've given them just a little bit of water so that we know that they can overcome this problem. But what do? They spill, and then they look up. Teacher, I just spilled. Well, Mr. Miyagi would kind of just step out of the situation and be like, keep doing what you're doing. And so that's kind of your role in the situation. That's the teacher's role, is to sort of let them work through it, because they know they've got the structure there. You might prompt them with a question and say, what can you do? Or could you clean it? Or something like that. And then let them use that problem-solving skill. So even though you're giving them this very simple work of pouring, it's really teaching them so much more than that. And that goes all the way back to the partnership that we talked about before. When you think about how a partnership works, you probably have several partnerships in your life. Maybe you have your spouse, or you have a coworker. And one aspect of the partnership is that the skills of your partner actually benefits you, and it benefits the partnership too. And so when you look at your partner, let's say your partner at work is great at coding or accounting or whatever, but they're not the best communicator in the world. They're not the best, let's say, at understanding how to connect with another person. I guess there are 2 ways to handle that as a partner. One, you can overcompensate for it and you just sort of push through, or you can try to help your partner develop those skills. And in so doing, it actually benefits the partnership. And so when you're trying to figure out what is the right indirect skill for your child, maybe think of it in those terms. How can I help my child strengthen our partnership? And your partnership is that relationship of taking care of the home and taking care of the family. Children should and can be involved in those areas, but they need skills to do it. Since we're talking about young children, always some of the basic skills are going to be patience. So going back to that pouring work, all of this work, in the Montessori classroom, when you put it in front of the child, it requires patience. And anything that requires patience will teach patience. And how it requires patience is that if you put it in front of the child, nothing happens with the work unless the child sustains some kind of effort towards it. So you can put 2 pitchers of water in front of a child, but he doesn't do anything. It's not interesting at all. So in order to make it interesting, in order to make it relevant for the child, he needs to do something. One interesting fact is that all children from about 10 months to 4.5 years are fascinated with water. So if you put 2 pitchers of water in front of a child, they're not just going to ignore it. They're going to go to it. And because they're sticking with it, they are building patience every time. Now that's sensitive periods. That's a little peek behind the next curtain we're going to talk about. Anyways, we're coming up on the 10-minute mark, and I hope there was a little bit of content in here that helped you. I'll go back and watch it, and maybe I'll just leave it and we'll start over. Anyways, until part 3, see ya.